Hi everyone, my name is Ethan. This is At the Library, where I go through my selection of films that I'm going to be watching throughout the week. The first one I've got is by someone who's very important to me as a director. It's called The Flavor of Green Tea Over Rice. This is a new edition by Criterion that came out maybe a month, 2 months ago. And this is the period of transition between Late Spring and Tokyo Story. This came out in 1952. Ozu is someone who's really important to me because of the way his aesthetic, how it developed, can be kind of extreme at times, how precise he is with his editing and his mise-en-scène, but he is someone that really taught me that film doesn't have to be kind of a Western ideal of filmmaking. He's very much an individual in terms of not only Japanese filmmaking, but in terms of world cinema as well. And so I'm really excited to watch this because his late work, as opposed to his early work, which this is kind of right in between, or I guess right in between. He did do a lot of silent filmmaking at the beginning of his career, but I'm really excited to watch this because it's going to be an interesting point of transition for him. So the next film I got, because it is October and we need to watch something that is within the horror film genre, I got George A. Romero's Martin. I know Romero primarily through his Dead trilogy, so Night, Dawn, and Land. This is kind of his, well, they're all indie films, but this is his most independent kind of art house style film about a young man who may be a serial killer or he may be a vampire. We're not really sure which. Romero also, I think, is really interesting in the history of American independent cinema. He is a huge force in terms of how we define what independent means in terms of an American context, and I just think that rather than just focusing on your Cassavetes, your Jarmuschs, and then going into this 90s indie explosion, that Romero's a huge part of that, and I think celebrating that and being cognizant of that is super important. And I'm really excited to watch Martin because I've only really known his zombie films, and it'll be interesting to see him do something else in terms of horror filmmaking. This next film, I have not watched a movie from Africa in quite a long time. I think earlier in the year I watched a film called Yilen, which was phenomenal, but I haven't picked up anything by this director in a while, so I picked up Hyenas, which is a film by Djibril Diop Membeti. So I first ran into this director. Martin Scorsese put together a Criterion box set a couple of years back with about 5 to 6 foreign films from around the world that he thought were super important yet underseen in the West. And one of Membeti's films was in there. I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong. It's called Toki Boki, and it is very much influenced by Godard, but in a much more kind of extreme manner. The way that he shoots in the film, but also the kind of subject matter of two lovers on the run and caught up in this kind of political evolution of Africa at the time is super interesting. It wasn't one of my favorite films at the time, but I really want to revisit this director, primarily also because it's on Jonathan Rosenbaum's, who he was the critic for the Chicago Reader up until a couple of years back. It's on one of his top 1001 films to see of all time. The next film is another Letterboxd recommended film. I actually don't know too much about this, so I probably won't have that much to say. But this is a film called The Watermelon Woman. And I mean, we can just read from the back of the box. Cheryl, a young black woman working in a video store, is making a documentary about an obscure black actress from the 1930s. When she discovers that the actress, known as the Watermelon Woman, had a white lesbian lover, Cheryl just happens to fall in love with a very cute white woman herself. This film, I do believe, is kind of in the late 80s, early 90s African-American explosion in terms of filmmaking. Not only, I think, the most popular examples of those directors would be John Singleton or Spike Lee, but also Charles Burnett's return to filmmaking with To Sleep with Anger in the early 90s with Danny Glover. So I really want to get more context on this era of filmmaking because I think it's super interesting and something that maybe isn't as explored as much, certainly on my end, but maybe in terms of the larger film conversation as well. So we'll move on to another Criterion Blu-ray, because we have a lot of these here at the library. This is a G.W. Papp's West Front 1918. I know about Pabst a little bit. I am pretty familiar with his films with Louise Brooks, so Diary of a Lost Girl and Pandora's Box. But this is a German language film that he did back in 1930. Very much a kind of gritty World War I drama about life in the trenches for a German soldier, so kind of in the vein of All Quiet on the Western Front. But I'm really interested to see this not only in a Blu-ray format, but also just to get more context for what Pabst was doing prior to or in contemporarily with his works in Hollywood with Louise Brooks. And finally, because I need something from Aki Kaurismäki, because I haven't seen him in anything by him in a little while. This is Leningrad Cowboys Go America. It's another Criterion-related title. It's from series 29, Aki Kaurismäki's Leningrad Cowboys. I really love Kaurismäki's style, his deadpan humor, his compositions in black and white and in color that he's been doing kind of recently, and the influence that he had on one of my favorite American directors, Jim Jarmusch. So that's what I'm going to be watching this week. If you guys want to put anything that you're watching in the comments below, feel free to, and if you want to, please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll be around sometime soon to give you more picks that I've had at the library.